Hello, is it working?
Yes.
Hey, how's it going, Martin?
Good. How are you?
Well, always open to hearing the opposite side there, but
Yeah, I heard that there was a Discord dedicated to cassava, so I thought that was really interesting. Most stocks don't have a Discord, which kind of leads me to believe what I've been kind of talking about all along, which is sort of a cult stock that has no basis in reality. The price has no basis in reality, but reality, the price, whenever a bunch of people want to get together and buy a stock because they have this collective hope, sometimes you get this like bizarre phenomenon where the price goes up a lot more than maybe you would expect.
yeah, I can agree with that, but that doesn't really change what the company is doing and if the company will be successful. Like, a company can be successful and still have a cult behind it, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. There are a lot of cult stocks like Nvidia and many others. But let me ask you something. Have you done a lot of biotech investing?
Me? No, I have not,
Okay.
to be honest. This is a pure gamble for me. Based on my current knowledge and my expertise, I understand that this is definitely not in my wheelhouse, and I don't have my entire net worth in it.
It seems like most people in cassava are in that same position, where this is like this represents a utility function for shareholders to exercise a gamble. Even Matt Nacktrap, right? The guy's like, I was running circles around him in 5 minutes. Like, he doesn't understand anything about medicine. And I think he admits that at this point. But he's got a $70 million gamble. Good for him. Hope that's not all of his portfolio. And I'm worried it's actually a pretty large part of his portfolio. But, you know, he's a big boy. He'll figure it out if it doesn't work his way.
You don't put any weight on maybe some of the expertise and the experience of the people that are in the company?
No,
at all?
I mean, I know Remy. Remy was my big boss in hedge fund industries, college roommate. So he went to Oberlin. Nothing wrong with that. My Oberlin's, obviously not a medical school or a business college, but it's kind of a hippie liberal arts thing. But Remy went to college with Steve, and Steve became one of the biggest hedge fund managers on Wall Street. So, anybody can achieve anything if they try hard enough. But I met Remy around 2004. The company was called 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗅𝗍𝒡cs back then. Remy, despite, not having a degree or whatever, Remy never really tried to become a sort of science person. He was always pretty fast and loose. And I think that's the reason, like, he had 3 drug candidates. None of them worked. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 was this like long-acting, hard-to-abuse oxy. Then he had 𝗏𝗏𝗏, basically oxy with low-dose naltrexone. And then he had just low-dose naltrexone for IBS. All 3 failed. So like he burned like $500 million in that. So to me, if you're talking about track records, this guy's maybe got one of the worst. And he comes out with Cemiflam, which, to say the least, has got some issues. So, we're going to get the results of these trials soon, but Remy's had a lot of problems. I remember in the IBS study for low-dose naltrexone, I talked to a lot of doctors who were in the trial. Back then, it was a little more, gray area to do that. Today, most hedge funds would stay away from doing that. But back then, I did that, and one of the doctors told me that he thought that the drug was doing really well. And it's a placebo-controlled study. How do you know? And the doctor's like, oh, I just think I know. And I was like, all right, well, we'll see what happens. And I told my boss, and my boss was excited by that. Of course, the trial failed, and we lost like $10 million on it. And it was, that's the Remy that I know. But I don't have any chagrin or like bad feelings. He was always a nice guy, super, super friendly to me, super nice. I did remember him saying once that running a biotech hedge fund is easy. And I said, why is that? And he said, it's because you just bet on phase 3 failures, and they always happen. And I thought that was kind of funny, given the current, it's 20 years later. I don't think he ever thought this situation would happen. But, I hope that they don't arrest him or indict him. I mean, I think he's a good dude. He's most of Wall Street and the biopharm community kind of consider him to be a bit of a snake oil salesman. Like, he's a little too slick. Like, he's always kind of like hyperbolic and, I don't know, just a little too promotional. he was very promotional around pain therapeutics. A lot of people were short pain therapeutics, and now cassava is kind of repeating itself. The Dr. Wang stuff is fairly alarming. I mean, it's just not every day you get arrested as a scientist.
Doesn't it just really come down to, does the drug do what they say it does?
Yeah. Does it work for Alzheimer's patients?
So isn't all the stuff that you just mentioned kind of a moot point? Like if it works, and even if Dr. Wang gets arrested and Remy is a snake salesman, if the drug works, isn't that all a moot point anyway?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the job of a biotech investor is to figure out if the drug works, right? I mean, there are real biotech companies that have they don't have any research lab. They're not doing any serious work. I mean, this is a very small company without, real serious footprint. I mean, there's no one I would point to at the company that is like very impressive and has done a lot of stuff or did a lot of stuff at Pfizer or Merck or some other big drug company or started another big biotech that worked out really well. I don't think 𝗕𝗏 does anything. I think it's this like contrived nonsense. This 𝗕𝗏𝗡 hypothesis is so absurd. It's insane. 𝗕𝗏𝗡 is like this protein that does nothing, that is basically, if you bind it, nothing will happen. Like it doesn't, it's a structural protein. So like it doesn't actually do anything sort of enzymatically or something like that. And typically, I mean, there's very few drugs that work on structural proteins at all. Typically you want, for example, the amyloid cascade, you have a lot of things going on there that you could pick on. Some people have tried to target amyloid from becoming from monomer to oligomer, for example, for amyloid stacking on itself to elongate and become a fibril. Some people have tried to stop the processing of amyloid through inhibiting an enzyme or a series of enzymes. Some people have tried to increase the, support the brain clearing the amyloid. There's a lot of strategies, but here this 𝗕𝗏 thing is just kind of nonsensical. And the only person that's ever cared about it is this company, whereas like the rest of the industry is really excited about Alzheimer's. Everyone wants to make $1 billion or $1 trillion making an Alzheimer's drug, but it has to make sense. And a lot of Wang's work has now been retracted, and there's no other labs that are excited about this or chasing it. Like Merck or Pfizer or J&J or Lilly would be very excited about doing this if they could, if they thought it was real. And that doesn't mean that it's not real. But it's not a good sign. I like to look at first principles, like why is this protein doing anything? It's a cytoskeletal protein that sort of scaffolds the cytoskeleton to the cell membrane. The alpha-7 receptor doesn't do much in Alzheimer's. They've made drugs that block alpha-7 completely, and that doesn't help in Alzheimer's. And they've made drugs that activate alpha-7, and it doesn't help in Alzheimer's. So you have this like very weird hypothesis that somehow 𝗕𝗏 interacts with alpha-7, which I'm just not sure makes a lot of sense. One, because I don't think those proteins just like normally interact regardless. There's a lot of suspicion.
Yeah, but we can talk about what we think and what we believe, but I think it really comes down to scientifically if the trials work and if the data shows it'll work. Right?
So I think that to predict whether a trial will work or not, in essence, you have to start with the basic science and build yourself up to the human clinical results. You don't start typically a phase 3 on blind faith. You have some phase 2 data to go on that's hopefully pointing in the right direction, which I contend is not the case here. And then, you make your bet on phase 3. And even the most likely, drugs, for example, I've was involved in a drug called Dimebon, and it had a very successful phase 2, far more successful than cassava's, and it failed in phase 3. And the reasoning is long and twisted, but the very first exciting drug for Alzheimer's, bapineuzumab, the first A-beta antibody, people were really excited about that. And it ended up failing as well, even though it had fairly good phase 2 data. So it's difficult. This is a tough space. It's hard to know what will help cognition, which is a very complex metaphysical kind of emergent dynamic versus physiological changes like blood pressure or something like that, cognition is like really hard to get your head around scientifically. And that there's a reason that very few people have ever been able to make an Alzheimer's drug. So just like blindly thinking that this one might work, I think is, it's wishful thinking. And again, I made money shorting biotechs my whole life. It's not that, new to me. But it's just, you see the same sort of dynamic every time where hope springs eternal. There's always this hope that, look, if it worked and everything I said was dead wrong, I don't know the science, I don't know clinical trials, I don't know any of this stuff, and I'm just wrong, and it has a clear success in phase 3, 4 or 5 point separation from placebo, yeah, it's going to be one of the biggest drugs of all time. It could sell 40, 50 billion in revenue. It could be, as big as the company could be as big as Pfizer. But, that's cool. But there's, that's exciting if you're along. But the problem is, what is the odds of it happening? And they're basically, in my opinion, pretty much zero. But, I think what people confuse is like, because it's a drug and because it's possible that the drug works, there's some percentage, like probabilistically, this is a really exciting opportunity. And I think that, personally, I just haven't seen that really work in biopharma. And I think that it's maybe not the best way to go, because there's only going to be one answer here. It's a deterministic thing. It's not a probabilistic thing. But people like the probability, so they think it's not deterministic, but it is deterministic. With respect to the statistical data, it's very common in open label studies for there to be performance that's not expected. For example, I was just looking at a drug from another biotech company, and this would be like an example of like a sophisticated biotech company that's got a lot of high quality people and has 2 partnerships with 2 big pharmas like J&J. The company's called Protagonist, and they're in phase 3 with a really sophisticated, well-designed drug. And Protagonist is treating psoriasis. So they did the psoriasis study, and in placebo, I have it on my screen now, so for Protagonist, what was really surprising is this, they had an 80%, what's called PASI 75, which is 75% clearance of psoriasis, which is pretty good. 75% is, really tough to get, and 79% of patients got that. But 9% of placebo did too. And it's really bizarre, because how does a person who's covered in psoriasis have a 10% chance of getting mostly clear skin? Just sort of bizarre and odd. And I think in a lot of these trials, you'll see weird things. And the reason we do controlled trials, I'm not trying to be patronizing here, but the reason controlled trials are done is that you need a yardstick to measure against, and you can't take the yardstick from somewhere else. It has to be within the trial. And the trial's control for location, like are the sites in the US or not, and they're stratified across all of those things. So you can be confident that the results are real, and not just, well, for example, what happens in cancer a lot is if you do your cancer trial at Memorial Sloan Kettering versus Larry's local, oncology clinic, you can imagine that they do a little bit better in Memorial Sloan Kettering. That's not a surprise. And then if you do 10 clinical sites like that, or 3 or something like that, and you don't do any local kind of community hospital sites, your results are probably going to be a little bit better than you think if you're measuring like overall survival or something. Because there's a reason those tertiary centers, those famous doctors, they're getting just a little bit more. If you're normally going to live 6 months with this disease, they might get you 7 or 8, because they know every little trick. They know every, was I kicked out? I think I might have been kicked out. Yeah, I'm an actual biotech investor who has made a lot of money in biotech. I've started successful biotech companies, more successful than anybody in that chat room. So if they want to bury their heads in the sand, that's fine by me, I guess. Spent a whole life training for moments like this. I used to rhyme like this, shine like that. They can't handle
the truth.
It's tough when the narrative violation, cognitive dissonance. It's not so much the truth, it's just like, I think they understand that this thing is a wild gamble. The guy was like very honest. The other guys banned me before, like it was kind of working, quote unquote, for that guy. He was like, oh, maybe you're right. But like, I don't want to convert anybody. I hope the stock goes to 100. I want to short as much as I can. You know, like, I'm not trying to get you to capitulate and sell. I want the price high.
Show your thesis to the guy that's got the 70 million in it. What does he think?
There's a video of that, and I think it made it clear in that video that there's basically, that he basically just doesn't understand biopharma at all. And I think he sort of acknowledged that. He spent some time like talking about open label results, and it's like, dude, if you've ever done this business, you know open label results are useless.
Or there's a YouTuber named Joe Schrader in your Discord.
Oh my God.
He's talked about Snobbo for 2 years. I don't know if he's smart.
No, he's
but
not.
It'd be very funny to bring on here.
He's not smart. I don't think he's in my Discord.
Joe Springer?
Oh my God, he is in my Discord.
Please bring him on. He's one of my favorite people, like, in biotech. He's hilarious.
He's not in biotech. What? People in biotech.
No, okay, you're right. He's a YouTuber. He made his last video was like him pleading to be the CEO of CELLADON.
I saw that. And then he made another one about a cassava acquisition. I dealt with big pharma boards and CEOs for a long time. Nobody wants to acquire cassava. Stop it. Yeah.
What were you guys discussing before I got in?
Nothing really, just looking for somebody to chat with. So as we were saying, yeah, I mean, I do think there are times when you can be relatively certain that a drug won't work. It's rare that you can make a bet that makes sense, because like a lot of people chase the same bet and you end up in this like crowded short that doesn't work great. I was short a company called CELLADON. Like most of these companies don't have there's no cult, there's no chat room, there's no, right? Like there's just not there was no interest in any of that stuff. So CELLADON had one drug, just like cassava. I was like very sure that it would not work. I made around 10 million bucks on this short, and my bankers at UBS were pretty nervous that CELLADON, if it worked, like I could put potentially, not just my account would basically be gone, but like UBS would maybe eat a couple $100 million in losses. And I had to convince them that that wasn't going to be a problem. Because there's an old joke. If you lose $100 million, it's your problem. You lose $100 million, it's the bank's problem. And look what happened with our boy Bill Wang. We worked at the same, we know a lot of the same people. We worked for the same like parent org. Bill Wang lost $2 billion of other people's money, or more, I want to say. Anyway, CELLADON failed, and then they became Eiger Biopharma, a privately held biopharma company today. Today announced that they have entered into a definitive merger agreement where basically Eiger gets to buy, Eiger is going to own 78% and CELLADON is going to own 22%. So after the cassava failure, what'll end up happening is they'll just do a merger, and there's no website anymore. There's no trace of CELLADON whatsoever. The CELLADON domain is for sale for $8,000. So like CELLADON just disappeared into the ether, and that wasn't a long time ago. It's just like it happened within like a few years. People I know who are short cassava, like at the end of the day, like they look at it and they're like, okay, it's like pretty much 95% it's going to fail. I like to get to like 99.9 if I can, because it's really hard to determine if an uncertain outcome, what the outcome will be ahead of time. It's very hard. And there are some situations in life where I think you can. For example, if you throw a dice, I'd say it's very close to statistically impossible that you'll get 1,000 sixes in a row. And you could do, a simple multiplications, 0.1666 to the 1,000th power. It's a very, very low probability. It gets very low even at like 10, let alone 1,000. So, pretty simple, math can get you the answer. And of course, clinical trials are not as simple as something like that. You can't reduce them to a formula, but you can get a sense for what the biology, what the requirements are in biology. And what we know about Alzheimer's is that certain mutations will cause familial Alzheimer's. Otherwise, it's sort of thought to be a sporadic disease. But those clues from the familial Alzheimer's tell us that amyloid beta processing or beta amyloid processing is very, very important. Cemiphilam doesn't do anything to amyloid beta, has no relationship. They've not shown any reason that this drug could have any effect on the actual disease in this case.